can Elon steer this the other way?
Look, I mean, obviously the leader's back, right? I mean, Musk is Tesla, Tesla is Musk, but I believe it's really about autonomous. I mean, I think as we go into Austin in June, you go into the robotics future, that's going to be a key part of the value of Tesla. It's how we get to a $2 trillion valuation. But when you look at Europe, you look at US, you look at China, and I think Musk is going to start to turn that around. And I think that's where investors are starting to factor in, not necessarily what's happening next month or two, but a rebound second half of the year.
Okay, so stomach for the near term, these probably remaining poor numbers. The new refreshed Model Y isn't cutting it, it seems. It is more the political backlash. But you think ultimately the technology is going to outweigh a brand issue that they've had?
Yeah, I mean, look, me and you've talked about it before. I believe 90% of the future value is autonomous and robotics. Now, look, in terms of margins, delivery, growth, that's obviously very important to near-term numbers. But I do believe Street's factoring in, you start to see a rebound second half of the year. You have a recommitted Musk, clearly. And I think when you look to the future, I mean, this along with NVIDIA, I believe the most disruptive technology companies in the world. And then who's driving the software piece? Of course, it's Palantir.
But why is Tesla clearly going to be such a leadership in autonomous when Waymo's already busy doing it? And there is a difference in the technology here, with Waymo going all in on LiDAR and a very different tactic coming from Elon Musk and Tesla.
Yeah, look, Waymo clearly a head start, but I think Waymo, they're going to be at the kids' table relative to where I view Tesla in the coming years because of the scale and scope. Waymo's in 4 cities, $230,000 cars. Like, in other words, when I look out over the coming years, I think this is going to be dominated by Tesla in terms of cybercabs. It all starts obviously in the next few weeks in Austin, but no one will match the global scale and scope of Musk and Tesla.
So what milestones in Austin, for example, do they need to meet? Ed Ludlow with that great reporting out last week that June 12th is going to be the date we're anticipating for it to already make actionable what they've been trialing on the roads thus far. What do they need to meet? How do they need to show off and the technology to work?
Look, the interventions, right? I mean, just showing that this is something that is ready for prime time, because this is just the beginning of ultimately going to be 15, 20, 25 cities over the next year. And I think this is just really kind of laying the groundwork from a technology perspective, showing where Tesla's going to get to. And what I believe, look, Waymo is going to be successful, and that's going to be a key sort of player. But in terms of the global vision, who's really going to dominate, I believe it's Tesla and autonomous.
And is it the cybercab that dominates? Is it the fact that the Teslas are already out on the road and they become the autonomous vehicles? They are the ones that we don't use ourselves but lend out to the ecosystem?
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, it's data-driven. I mean, by next year, you have 10 million vehicles, in terms of Teslas that have been sold. Data-driven. But I do believe cybercabs, when you think about the autonomous piece, that's going to be so important. But then also it's about FSD. I mean, FSD penetration could go from 15% to 50%. Think about the margin, the software, the uplift that's going to lead to Tesla. And that's why I believe they're going into their biggest chapter of growth. And that's why also it's just so important that Musk laser focus on Tesla in those days in Trump White House and now rearview mirror.
And you think he will be laser focused on Tesla, because he's also saying, I've got to be laser focused on X. He's also remaining very committed and focused on SpaceX as well, and not to mention XAI getting woven into X at the moment.
Look, it's all part of obviously the broader Musk ecosystem, but the hearts and lungs, the golden goose continues to be Tesla. And I think Musk recognizes now is the time, especially given autonomous and robotics with Optimus.
Tell us the $2 trillion valuation and how you actually got there from a numbers perspective.
Look, when I look at autonomous, and you start to model out what could ultimately be 20% of vehicles being autonomous, you're essentially looking $3-4 of earnings. Eventually, is going to be $13 to $15 earnings. So the whole math of the Tesla valuation is going to drastically change, and that's all about, like, I believe from an AI perspective, one of probably the most undervalued pure plays in the market is Tesla. Now, of course, NVIDIA, Palantir, the hyperscalers, Microsoft, and others continue to be front and center. But, Tesla more and more is going to prove that when you, especially in the physical AI play in terms of autonomous and robotics, they're going to be front and center.
At the moment, it's a $1 trillion market capitalization. How quickly does this $2 trillion become a reality?
I think next 12 to 18 months. And I think that
it's going to double in that amount of time.
That's our view. And I think it could be conservative relative to as this all plays out. Because I think, again, Musk and Tesla underestimated. Next week, probably, call it, late next week, when this actually, the vision starts, it's going to kick off, I think it's a golden age at Tesla.
You are the highest price target, 500. Fubon securities below you, 470. But the price targets go all the way down to just, JP Morgan at 115. So what is it that others aren't getting here? Is it just the scale of the ambition? Is it the execution? What is it when you sit around the table with other analysts that they're like, no, Dan, and you're like, no, yes?
Well, yeah, to that point, if you go back over the last 5, 7, 8 years, they've underestimated Tesla and Musk every time, right? So, many thought that the chance of them actually coming out with an EV was unrealistic. The chance of them scaling to over 1 million vehicles. And it was just again. I think they continue to view this as an automobile company. It's a disruptive technology player, one of the best in the world, along with NVIDIA and, of course, Palantir.
Therefore, we're looking forward to the global story here. Does this have to be executed in the US? What about over in China at the moment, where we're just seeing the level of price competition and indeed the commitment that we're starting to see from BYD also into autonomous?
Look, China's a key market. You're talking about over 40% of deliveries that come out of China to keep up from a supply perspective. But it's also why, too, it's important more and more Musk that he distanced himself in terms of from Trump White House. Now start to play that 10% politician, 90% CEO, what we see from Apple. China's key. And I think we're going to continue to see now a rebound in China. And autonomous, Tesla's going to be a major player in that market along with BYD and others.
And then let's talk robotics, because I'm hearing more and more about how robotics is going to be the next area of key growth. How quickly does the Optimus become the $2 trillion driver?
And remember, we're not even really factoring that in. So it speaks to our view, like when you look at Optimus and as that plays out, robotics potentially could even be bigger than autonomous. And I think when it comes to physical AI, it's Tesla and NVIDIA that are leading that. And I think this is going to get, in the next 12, 18, 24 months, it's the reality, right? The scale and scope is something that Tesla has a huge advantage of. And that's why I think Optimus is something that, again, I think investors, Wall Street, massively underestimating, but they will be proven wrong, I think, as this all plays out.
How much is supply chain going to be a bottleneck here? Because we keep talking time and time again about the rare earths control that China has. The fact that Tesla is so present in China from a supply side perspective, is that a winning formula?
Oh, you just nailed it. I think that's the key, right? Like having such a big presence. And of course, Musk has very good relationship in Beijing, in terms of their footprint. That is very important. It gives them a huge advantage. And also, I think it speaks to the timing, especially in this U.S.-China negotiations. The further and further Musk distance himself from Trump in the White House, I think is important, especially when it plays to what's happening in China.
I'm going to end on Apple, because you were just talking about other companies that have been owning this space, Palantir, of course, being one that you keep mentioning within software. But what about the future of Apple right now from a supply chain perspective, from a geopolitical perspective? Because it seems as though, Tim Cook needs to be a little bit more politician right now, too.
Yeah, but I think there's no better CEO in the world that can navigate it than
He's not done very well so far.
I would disagree to the point that he's been able to navigate to India, which is actually a huge part of the poker move, puts him in a lot better negotiation position. And also, look, the chances of iPhones coming to the U.S. we continue to view as unrealistic, unless you want a $3,500 iPhone. And Cook's another one. There's an understanding, okay, they might have been late to the game, but the consumer AI revolution comes through Cupertino. You'll start to see that next week, WWDC. I view that as a very important event that starts this next chapter.